What happens when a security guard aggressively pushes a homeless veteran out of an upscale restaurant? The guard's harsh words echo through the elegant dining room as wealthy patrons watch in stunned silence. The homeless man, wearing tattered military fatigues, stumbles backward, his weathered face marked with quiet dignity rather than anger. But the guard isn't finished. He grabs the man's worn backpack, preparing to forcefully remove him from the premises. No one moves to intervene, until a tall figure rises from a corner booth, his presence commanding immediate attention. The guard freezes mid-motion, his grip loosening on the homeless man's belongings. Because standing there, his face lined with controlled anger, is none other than Keanu Reeves. The entire restaurant holds its breath, waiting to see what happens next. This isn't just a story about a chance encounter. It's about dignity, humanity, and how a single moment can change multiple lives forever. The security guard has no idea that his actions are about to trigger a chain of events that will transform not only his own life but impact an entire community. A simple winter evening at an upscale restaurant is about to become a powerful lesson in compassion that no one present will ever forget. John Miller trudged through the snow-covered streets of downtown Chicago, his worn military boots leaving deep footprints in the fresh powder. The bitter January wind cut through his thin jacket, a reminder of another harsh winter spent without proper shelter. At 45, his face carried the weight of experiences most people couldn't imagine. From decorated Marine sergeant to homeless veteran, life had dealt him a series of cruel blows. The upscale restaurant district glowed with warm light, a stark contrast to the gathering darkness. Through massive windows, John could see families enjoying their evening meals, waiters carrying steaming plates, and business people clinching deals over expensive wine. He usually avoided this area, knowing how unwelcome his presence made people feel, but tonight was different. The temperature had dropped below zero, and the shelter was already full when he'd arrived. His stomach growled as the rich aroma of grilled steak wafted from Giovanni's, the city's most prestigious Italian restaurant. The same restaurant where, just last week, a kind waitress had secretly slipped him leftover bread at closing time. She'd whispered that she had a brother in the Marines, and her eyes had filled with tears when she saw John's service pins carefully attached to his backpack. The restaurant's golden light spilled onto the sidewalk, promising warmth and shelter from the brutal cold. John touched the military medal in his pocket, his last possession of value, but one he couldn't bear to sell. It reminded him of who he once was, before the PTSD took his job, before the medical bills took his savings, before grief took his will to start over. A group of well-dressed diners pushed past him to enter Giovanni's, their laughter fading as they noticed him standing there. One woman clutched her designer purse tighter, while a man in an expensive suit steered his family away from John's path. He was used to these reactions, but they still stung. The restaurant's warmth beckoned through the open door, and John made a decision that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone present that evening. Taking a deep breath, he stepped toward the entrance, unaware that he was walking into a moment that would soon capture the nation's attention. 20 years ago, John Miller stood tall in his crisp Marine uniform, receiving a Purple Heart for his service in Afghanistan. His commanding officer had praised his extraordinary courage under fire, noting how John had risked his own life to save 3 fellow Marines during an ambush. Back then, his future seemed bright: decorated veteran status, a degree in engineering earned through the GI Bill, and a promising career ahead. The nightmares started small at first. A sudden noise would transport him back to the battlefield. Sleep became elusive, but John pushed through, landing a job at a construction firm and marrying his college sweetheart, Melissa. They bought a small house in the suburbs, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. Melissa understood his struggles with PTSD better than anyone, staying up during his sleepless nights, holding him through the panic attacks, and never once complaining about the darkness that sometimes consumed him. Then came the accident. A rainy night, a drunk driver, and in an instant, Melissa was gone. John spiraled into depression, the PTSD intensifying without his anchor. The panic attacks grew worse, making it impossible to focus at work. His performance suffered, and despite his boss's patience, eventually he lost his job. The medical bills piled up: therapy, medications, treatments, but without insurance, each attempt at healing pushed him further into debt. He sold the house first, then his car. The small apartment came next, followed by staying with friends until their patience wore thin. The veteran support systems he reached out to were overwhelmed, waiting lists stretching months into the future. John found himself joining the invisible ranks of America's homeless veterans, Men and women who had given everything for their country only to fall through society's cracks. Yet through it all, John maintained a quiet dignity. He kept his military medals polished, stored safely in his backpack along with his discharge papers and a worn photo of Melissa. Every morning, he would wash in public restrooms, keeping his gray-streaked beard neatly trimmed, his clothes as clean as circumstances allowed. The local library became his sanctuary during the day, where he would read engineering journals, remembering the man he used to be, the dreams he once held. Some of the other homeless veterans he met called him Sarge, respecting the way he looked out for them, sharing what little he had, organizing them when the shelters were full to make sure the elderly and sick got spots first. He never begged, never asked for handouts, picking up odd jobs when he could find them, helping unload trucks, clearing snow from sidewalks, anything to earn his way. The medal in his pocket was from Melissa. She had had it specially made after his Purple Heart ceremony, engraved with words that now seemed to mock him. To my hero, who never stops fighting. John touched it again as he stood outside Giovanni's, feeling the familiar weight of it against his fingers. The irony wasn't lost on him. A decorated Marine who had faced enemy fire without flinching, now gathering his courage to simply step into a restaurant, seeking nothing more than a brief respite from the cold. The security guard at Giovanni's, watching John through narrowed eyes, had no way of knowing any of this history. He saw only what society had conditioned him to see, a threat to the restaurant's prestigious atmosphere, a problem that needed to be removed. Neither of them realized that Keanu Reeves, sitting quietly in the corner booth, was about to change both their lives forever. The warmth of Giovanni's hit John like a wave as he stepped through the heavy wooden doors. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over white tablecloths and polished silverware. The sounds of gentle conversation and clinking glasses filled the air, mixing with the aroma of garlic and fresh-baked bread. For a moment, John stood motionless, overwhelmed by memories of celebrations with Melissa in places like this, back when life made sense. Alex Thompson, Giovanni's newly hired security guard, spotted John immediately. Fresh out of training and eager to prove himself, Alex had been warned about keeping out undesirable elements from the restaurant's elite clientele. He straightened his crisp black uniform and moved swiftly toward the entrance, his hand already raised in a stopping gesture. The restaurant's atmosphere shifted subtly. Conversations quieted as diners noticed John's presence. A businessman pulled his leather briefcase closer to his chair. A woman whispered something to her companion, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. The maitre d' stood frozen behind his podium, relief washing over his face as he saw Alex approaching. John noticed the changing atmosphere, the familiar wall of judgment descending around him. He had only wanted to warm up for a few minutes, maybe ask if they needed help in the kitchen in exchange for leftover food. The kind waitress who had helped him before wasn't working tonight. Her station stood empty near the window. Alex reached John before he could take another step into the restaurant. "Sir, you need to leave immediately." His voice carried across the now hushed dining room, sharp with authority. John kept his voice low, steady, addressing Alex with the same respect he'd once shown his junior officers. "I'm just looking to warm up for a few minutes. I can wait by the door." The security guard's face hardened. Here was his chance to show management how well he handled situations like this. "This is a private establishment. We have the right to refuse service to anyone." He stepped closer, invading John's personal space, trying to intimidate him toward the exit. John didn't move, his military training unconsciously asserting itself in his straight posture. "I understand that. I'm not asking for service. Just a few minutes out of the cold." His calm demeanor seemed to anger Alex further. A few diners had pulled out their phones, sensing the confrontation building. In the corner booth, partially hidden by an elegant room divider, Keanu Reeves paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. He had chosen Giovanni's for its reputation for privacy, hoping to enjoy a quiet meal while in Chicago filming his latest project. But something about the scene unfolding at the entrance caught his attention. He watched the interaction carefully, years of playing characters who stood up against injustice making him particularly attuned to the power dynamics at play. Alex grabbed John's arm, his patience evaporating. "I said leave." The grip was unnecessarily tight, professional restraint techniques forgotten in his show of authority. John didn't resist, but he also didn't move, his combat training automatically engaging to maintain his balance. The restaurant manager emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. He took in the scene, the shabby clothes, the military backpack, the growing audience of uncomfortable diners, and made a quick decision. "Alex, escort him out. Now." The words carried the full weight of authority, permission granted for whatever force might be necessary. Something shifted in Alex's expression, a flash of satisfaction, of power realized. He pushed John backward, hard enough that the veteran's boots scraped against the polished floor. "You heard him. Out." The shove was calculated to both move and humiliate. John stumbled, his back hitting the heavy wooden door. The metal in his pocket pressed against his leg, a small pain that somehow hurt more than the physical roughness. He could have defended himself, his combat training hadn't forgotten how, but that would only prove what these people already thought of him. The manager stepped forward, phone in hand. "Leave now or I'm calling the police." The threat hung in the air, heavy with implications. John knew how that would end. Another vagrant arrest, another mark against his name, another door closed to future opportunities. That's when Keanu Reeves stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound cutting through the tense silence. Every head turned toward the sound, but he was already moving, his face set in an expression that would have been familiar to anyone who had seen his films, the look of someone about to right a wrong. The atmosphere in Giovanni's shifted instantly as Keanu Reeves emerged from his corner booth. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding attention without saying a word. Alex's grip on John's arm loosened slightly as he registered the new development, confusion flickering across his face. Keanu moved with deliberate calm, his dark suit jacket catching the light from the chandeliers. The other diners sat perfectly still, phones raised, capturing every moment. The restaurant manager's face had drained of color, recognition dawning in his eyes as the Hollywood star approached. Alex found his voice first, though it wavered slightly. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. We're handling a security situation." He tried to sound authoritative, but the words came out uncertain. John remained silent, his military training evident in his composed stance despite the grip on his arm. Keanu stopped a few feet away, his expression neutral but his eyes intense. "A security situation? I've been watching for the past few minutes. The only threat to security I see is you." His voice carried across the silent restaurant, quiet but powerful. The manager stepped forward, switching instantly to his customer service tone. "Mr. Reeves, I apologize for any disruption to your meal. We're simply following our establishment's policies." Keanu turned his attention to John, noting the military backpack, the worn but clean clothes, the dignified bearing that spoke of service. "Sir, are you a veteran?" The question cut through the tension. John straightened slightly, muscle memory from years of military service. "Yes, sir. Marines, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." The patrons watched as Keanu's expression softened with respect, then hardened again as he turned back to Alex and the manager. "So this is how you treat someone who served our country? Someone who put his life on the line so you could stand here and what? Prove your power by pushing him around." Alex's face flushed red. He released John's arm but tried to maintain his authority. "Look, we have standards here. Our customers expect a certain environment." The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the watching crowd. Keanu stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. "Standards? Let me tell you about standards. This man probably knows more about standards, honor, and sacrifice than anyone in this room. Including me." He gestured around the elegant dining room. "All this luxury, all this comfort. It exists because of people like him who put everything on the line." The manager attempted damage control, seeing the phones recording everything. "Mr. Reeves, perhaps we could discuss this privately." Keanu cut him off with a sharp look. "No, I think this needs to be discussed right here. Because everyone needs to see what's happening." He turned to address the room at large. "Look at yourselves. All of you sitting here, enjoying your expensive meals, averting your eyes while a man who served his country gets treated like garbage. Is this what we've become?" The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Several diners lowered their phones, shame creeping across their faces. Alex's professional demeanor crumbled completely. "I was just doing my job." Keanu's response was immediate. "Your job is to provide security, not to strip away someone's dignity. There's a difference between doing your job and enjoying the power it gives you over others." The truth of those words hit Alex hard. He looked at John again, really looked at him this time, and saw beyond the worn clothes to the military bearing, the quiet dignity, the pain in his eyes. For the first time, he wondered about the story behind the man he'd been so quick to judge. John spoke then, his voice steady. "I didn't come here looking for trouble. Just a few minutes of warmth on a cold night." The simplicity of the request, stated with such dignity, made the entire situation seem even more shameful. Keanu placed a hand on John's shoulder. "You're not leaving. You're having dinner. As my guest." He turned to the manager, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "Unless there's some policy against that too?" The manager stumbled over his words. Of course not, Mr. Reeves. Right this way, please." But Keanu wasn't finished. He fixed Alex with a stern look. "You have a choice to make right now. You can either learn from this moment and become better, or you can keep being part of the problem. Which is it going to be?" Alex stood frozen, the weight of the situation finally hitting him fully. The phone's recording, the disgusted looks from patrons, the quiet strength of the man he tried to throw out, and the moral authority of Keanu Reeves, it all combined to shatter his previous worldview. Let me continue with Keanu's intervention. 1,000 word. Keanu guided John toward his corner booth, one hand resting supportively on the veteran's shoulder. The other diners watched in stunned silence as Hollywood royalty sat down with a homeless veteran at Giovanni's most exclusive table. The manager hovered anxiously nearby, realizing the situation had evolved far beyond his control. "Get us 2 of everything I ordered," Keanu instructed the nervous waiter who appeared. "And bring some fresh bread right away." He turned to John with genuine interest. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" John hesitated, unused to such direct kindness. "A few days ago, at the shelter. But they were running low on supplies." Alex remained rooted to his spot by the door, watching the scene unfold. His authority had evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of shame. The manager finally approached him, speaking in harsh whispers. "We'll discuss your position tomorrow. For now, just stay out of sight." Keanu's voice carried across the restaurant again. "No. He stays right here." Every head turned toward him. "In fact," he continued, "bring another chair. Alex needs to hear this." The security guard's face flushed red, but he found himself moving toward the table, drawn by the quiet authority in Keanu's voice. As the waiter brought fresh bread and wine, Keanu encouraged John to share his story. The veteran spoke softly at first, then with growing strength as he described his service, his struggles with PTSD, the loss of his wife Melissa, and his gradual descent into homelessness. Alex listened, each word hitting him like a physical blow as he realized the man he tried to throw out had sacrificed more than he could imagine. "I still remember the day I got this," John said, pulling out his Purple Heart medal. "Melissa was there. She was so proud." His voice caught slightly. Keanu examined the medal with reverence, then passed it to Alex. The security guard held it as if it might shatter, the weight of its significance finally reaching him. Other diners had stopped pretending to eat, their attention completely captured by the scene unfolding at the corner booth. Phones continued recording, but now they captured something different. Not just a confrontation, but a transformation. The manager watched helplessly as his exclusive restaurant became the stage for an unexpected lesson in humanity. "You know what the hardest part is?" John continued, encouraged by Keanu's genuine interest. "Not the cold, not the hunger. It's the way people look through you, like you're not even human anymore." Alex flinched, recognizing his own behavior in those words. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "I've played characters who've lost everything, who fought against impossible odds. But that's just acting. You've lived it. You're the real hero in this room." He turned to Alex. "And heroes deserve respect, don't they?" Alex found his voice, though it shook slightly. I never thought about it that way. We get so focused on following rules, on keeping up appearances." He looked directly at John. "I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. Not just wrong, it was cruel." The food arrived, plate after plate of Giovanni's finest dishes. John's eyes widened at the spread, but he maintained his military discipline, waiting for others to begin. Keanu noticed and smiled. "The core never leaves you, does it? Please eat. You've more than earned this." As John took his first bite of real food in days,
Keanu turned to the manager.
I think it's time to make some changes in your policies. Every veteran who walks through that door deserves respect. No exceptions. The manager nodded quickly, already envisioning the PR nightmare, or opportunity, unfolding on social media. The rest of the restaurant had become oddly quiet, the usual sounds of fine dining replaced by reflection. Several patrons looked ashamed, remembering their own initial reactions to John's presence.
A woman at a nearby table wiped tears from her eyes, reminded of her own father who had served in Vietnam.
The video of the incident at Giovanni's spread across social media like wildfire. #Keanu moment began trending, but this time the story wasn't just about a celebrity's kindness. It sparked a national conversation about how society treats its veterans. Local news crews gathered outside the restaurant, their cameras capturing the moment when John and Keanu finally emerged hours later. Alex had remained at the table throughout the meal, his security guard persona completely transformed. He listened as John shared more stories about his time in the Marines, about the brothers he'd lost in combat, about the struggles of transitioning back to civilian life. Each word deepened his understanding of the man he'd so quickly judged.
"I can't take back what I did," Alex said as the evening wound down.
"But I want to make it right." Keanu, who had been quietly observing the change in the young security guard, leaned forward. "Sometimes life gives us chances to rewrite our story. The question is, what will you do with that chance?" The restaurant manager, who had been anxiously watching the scene unfold, suddenly stepped forward with an unexpected announcement. "We're changing our policies, effective immediately. Any veteran who comes to Giovanni's will be treated with respect. We'll set up a monthly dinner program for homeless veterans." He paused, looking at Alex. "And we need someone to coordinate it, someone who understands both security and compassion." Alex's eyes widened as he understood the implied offer. A chance not just to keep his job, but to transform it into something meaningful. John reached across the table and offered his hand to the security guard who had tried to throw him out just hours earlier. Alex took it, the handshake sealing a transformation that went far beyond a simple apology. Keanu wasn't finished, though. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking quietly but purposefully. When he hung up, he turned to John. "I made some arrangements. There's a veterans rehabilitation center downtown that has a spot for you. Full program, housing, therapy, job training, everything you need to get back on your feet." John sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by how much his life had changed in a single evening. "I don't know how to thank you." Keanu shook his head. "Thank me by not giving up. Your story isn't over yet. It's just taking a new turn." The other diners, who had witnessed the entire evening unfold, began approaching the table one by one. A businessman handed John his card, mentioning his company's veteran hiring program. A woman tearfully shared that her father had struggled with PTSD after Vietnam, offering to connect John with veteran support groups. The same customers who had pulled their belongings closer when John entered now offered their support, transformed by witnessing the power of compassion and understanding. The manager insisted on boxing up all the remaining food, adding extra dishes from the kitchen. As John prepared to leave, Keanu had one more surprise. He handed him an envelope. "Inside is a card with my private contact information. If you ever need anything, call. And there's something else. Enough to help you get started again." Alex stood up, his security uniform feeling different somehow. "Let me help you with those bags." This time, his offer to assist came from a place of respect rather than force. As they walked toward the door, he turned to John. Would you be willing to help me set up the Veterans Dinner program? We could use your experience." Outside, a crowd had gathered, drawn by the social media storm. Camera flashes lit up the night as Keanu, John, and Alex emerged together. But this time, the story wasn't about a celebrity sighting. It was about humanity, redemption, and the power of seeing past appearances to recognize the dignity in every person. In the weeks that followed, Giovanni's restaurant became a symbol of change in the community. The first Veterans Dinner program, organized by Alex and John, filled every table in the restaurant. Veterans from all walks of life sat alongside regular patrons, sharing stories and breaking down the invisible barriers that had separated them for so long. Alex threw himself into his new role with passion. The same attention to detail that had once made him an overzealous security guard now served a greater purpose. He worked closely with local veterans organizations, learning about their needs and challenges. The sight of his security uniform, once a symbol of authority and exclusion, became a welcome presence for veterans seeking assistance. John moved into the rehabilitation center, beginning the long journey of healing. With proper medical care and therapy, his PTSD symptoms began to improve.
The job training program helped him brush up on his engineering skills, and within months, he had secured an interview with the businessman who had offered his card that fateful night. The video of the incident had accumulated millions of views, but its impact went beyond viral fame.
Other restaurants in the city began implementing similar programs.
The local news ran a series on homeless veterans, putting faces and stories to people who had long been invisible to society.
Community members started volunteering at shelters, inspired by the transformation they had witnessed. Keanu Reeves kept his promise, checking in regularly on John's progress. But more than that, his actions that night had created a ripple effect of kindness throughout the community.
The envelope he had given John contained not just money, but something more valuable, a chance to rebuild his life with dignity.
Alex and John developed an unexpected friendship, their weekly meetings to plan the veterans program evolving into genuine camaraderie. The young security guard learned more about military service, PTSD, and the challenges veterans face from these conversations than he ever could have from a training manual. In turn, his dedication to the program helped restore John's faith in humanity. Giovanni's itself underwent a transformation. The manager, initially worried about his upscale image, discovered that the veterans program actually enhanced the restaurant's reputation. Regular customers began requesting tables on veterans' dinner nights, eager to be part of the positive change in their community. The kind waitress who had once secretly slipped John bread now openly served at these events, proud to be part of something meaningful. The story became a case study in how a moment of confrontation could transform into an opportunity for growth and understanding.
Local businesses reached out to Giovanni's, seeking advice on how to implement similar programs.
The city council recognized the restaurant's initiative with a community service award, presented jointly to Alex and John.
1 year after the incident at Giovanni's, John stood in front of a crowd gathered for the anniversary celebration of the veterans program.
He wore a crisp suit now, his engineering job having restored not just his financial stability but his sense of purpose. The medal from Melissa hung proudly on his lapel, no longer a reminder of loss but a symbol of resilience. Alex stood beside him, still in his security uniform but wearing it differently now, with humility rather than authority. The program they had built together had served over 1,000 veterans in the past year, providing not just meals but connections, opportunities, and most importantly, dignity. The young security guard who had once tried to push a homeless man out into the cold had become one of the community's strongest advocates for veteran support.
Giovanni's had changed too. The restaurant's walls now displayed photographs of veterans alongside its usual elegant artwork.
The manager had discovered that true class wasn't about exclusivity but about how you treated people who couldn't offer anything in return.
The monthly veterans' dinners had become so popular that they had expanded to weekly events. A familiar figure slipped quietly into the back of the crowd, Keanu Reeves, returning to witness the fruits of that winter night's transformation.
He watched with quiet satisfaction as John and Alex shared their story, moving the audience to tears and action. The same phones that had recorded the confrontation now captured a celebration of change, hope, and human dignity.
John concluded his speech by holding up the envelope Keanu had given him that night.
"I never opened this," he revealed, "because what happened that night wasn't about money. It was about being seen, being treated with dignity, being given a chance to reclaim my life. And now, I'm giving this envelope to our new foundation, which will help other veterans find their way home." The applause that followed wasn't just for John or Alex or even Keanu. It was for the power of transformation, for the possibility that one moment of compassion could change not just a life but an entire community.
As John looked out over the crowd, he saw not the invisible man he had been, but the hero he had always been, finally recognized, finally home.